Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude, by Napoleon Hill and W. Clement Stone, 1959. Part 2, 5 Mental Bombshells for Attacking Success. Chapter 6, You've Got a Problem. That's good. So you've got a problem. That's good. Why? Because repeated victories over your problems are the rungs on your ladder of success. With each victory you grow in wisdom, stature, and experience. You become a better, bigger, more successful person each time you meet a problem and tackle and conquer it with positive mental attitude. Stop and think about it for a moment. Do you know of a single instance where any real achievement was made in your life, or in the life of any person in history, that was not due to a problem with which the individual was faced? Everyone has problems. This is because you and everything in the universe are in a constant process of change. Change is an inexorable natural law. What is important to you is that your success or failure to meet the challenges of change are dependent upon your mental attitude. You can direct your thoughts and control your emotions, and thus regulate your attitude. You can choose whether your attitude will be positive or negative. You can decide whether you will affect, use, control, or harmonize with the changes in yourself and your environment. You can ordain your destiny. When you meet the challenges of change with positive mental attitude, you can intelligently solve each problem with which you are confronted. How do you meet a problem with positive mental attitude? If you know and believe the first principal element of a positive mental attitude, God is always a good God, then you can effectively use the following formula and meet your problems. When you are faced with a problem that needs a solution, regardless of how perplexing it may be. 1. Ask for divine guidance. Ask for help in finding the right solution. 2. Engage in thinking time for the purpose of solving your problems. Remember that every adversity has the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit for those who have positive mental attitude. 3. State the problem. Analyze and define it. 4. State to yourself enthusiastically, "That's good." 5. Ask yourself some specific questions, such as A. What's good about it? B. How can I turn this adversity into a seed of equivalent or greater benefit, or how can I turn this liability into a greater asset? 6. Keep searching for answers to these questions until you find at least one answer that can work. Now the problems that will confront you will, broadly speaking, be of 3 kinds: personal problems, emotional, financial, mental, moral, physical, family problems, and business or professional problems. Because personal problems are the most immediate problems experienced by all of us, we would like to tell you the story of a man who met some of the most severe problems a human being can experience. As you read this story, see how he applied positive mental attitude to the solution of each difficulty until he achieved ultimate victory. He met his challenge to change with positive mental attitude at Leavenworth Penitentiary. This man was born in poverty. While in grade school, he sold newspapers and sinned shoes in and around the saloons on Seattle's waterfront to help his mother meet expenses. Later he became a cabin boy on an Alaskan freighter during the summer months. After he finished high school at the age of 17, he left home. He became one of the horde of hobos that rode the rails and traveled to every part of the United States. His companions were hard-bitten men. He gambled, associated with riffraff, men of the so-called Border Legion. Soldiers of fortune, fugitives, smugglers, cattle thieves, and the like were his companions. He joined the forces of Pancho Villa in Mexico. You can't skate close to those extra-legal operations without knowing about them, even if you have nothing to do with them, Charlie Ward said. My mistake was being with the wrong companions. My major sin was associating with people who were bad. From time to time he won large sums gambling, and then lost them. Finally he was arrested for narcotics smuggling. He was tried and convicted. Yet throughout his life Charlie Ward maintained his innocence of the charge on which he was convicted. Charlie Ward was 34 years old when he entered Leavenworth. He had never been in jail before in spite of his associates. And he was embittered. He vowed that no prison was strong enough to hold him. He looked for a chance to make a break. Then something happened. Charlie chose to change his attitude from negative to positive. He met the challenge to change with positive mental attitude. Something within him told him to stop being hostile and to become the best prisoner in the prison. From that very moment the entire tide of his life began to flow in the direction most favorable for him. By the simple change from negative to positive thinking, Charlie Ward began to master himself. He changed the direction of his aggressive personality. He forgave the federal agents who had brought about his plight. He quit hating the judge who sentenced him. He took a real good look at the Charlie Ward of the past. And he resolved to avoid the very appearance of evil in the future. He looked around for ways to make his stay in prison as pleasant as possible. First he asked himself some questions. And for the first time in his adult life he found his answer in books, particularly the book. In his prison cell he began to read the Bible. He read it and reread it. Thereafter, and up to the date of his death at the age of 73, he read the Bible every day for inspiration, guidance and help. Because of his change in attitude, and consequently in behavior, he began to attract favorable notice from the prison officials. And one day a convict clerk told him that a trustee in the power plant was to be released in 3 months. Charlie Ward knew little about electricity, but there were books on electricity in the prison library. So he studied. He learned what these books could teach him. At the end of 3 months, Charlie was ready. He applied for the job. Something about his mannerism and his tone of voice impressed the deputy warden. That something was the earnestness and sincerity of Charlie Ward's positive mental attitude. He got the job. Because he continued to study and work with positive mental attitude, Charlie Ward became superintendent of the prison power plant with 150 men under him. He tried to inspire each one of them to make the best of his situation. When Herbert Hughes Bigelow, president of Brown and Bigelow of St. Paul, Minnesota, arrived at Leavenworth on a conviction of income tax evasion, Charlie Ward also befriended him. In fact, he went out of his way to motivate Bigelow to adjust himself to his environment. Mr. Bigelow was so appreciative of Charlie's friendship and help that as his prison term approached its end, he told Charlie, "You have been good to me. When you get out, come to St. Paul. We will have a job for you." 5 weeks later Charlie was released from prison and went to St. Paul. As he had promised, Mr. Bigelow gave Charlie a job. He was given work as a laborer at $25 a week. Because Charlie worked with positive mental attitude, he became a foreman within 2 months. After a year, he became a superintendent. Finally Charlie was made vice president and general manager. And when Mr. Bigelow died, Charlie was made president of Brown and Bigelow. He continued in this capacity until his own death many years later. Under Charlie's management, sales rose from less than $3 million to over $50 million annually. Brown and Bigelow became the largest company of its kind. Because of Ward's positive mental attitude and his desire to help those less fortunate, he himself received peace of mind, happiness, love, and the better things in life. By presidential decree, his rights as a citizen were restored in acknowledgement of his exemplary life. Those who knew him held him in the highest esteem, and were themselves inspired to help others. Perhaps one of his most unusual and commendable activities was his employment of over 500 men and women who had come from prisons. They continued their rehabilitation under his stern and understanding guidance and inspiration. He never forgot that he too had been a convict. He wore a tag on his bracelet with his old prison number as a symbol. Charlie Ward had been sentenced to prison. That was good. Why? Who knows what might have become of Charlie Ward had he continued in the direction in which he was headed. But in prison he met the challenge to change. And there he learned to use positive mental attitude to solve his personal problems. He made his world a better world to live in. He became a bigger and better man. No one will ever know the exact number of the needy who have prayed for blessings to Charlie Ward in response to their inner thoughts. "I was naked and ye clothed me, I was sick and ye visited me. I was in prison and ye came unto me. Fortunately not everyone is faced with problems as severe as those which Charlie Ward was called upon to meet and solve. But there is a lesson in Charlie's story, in addition to the fact that he changed his attitude from negative to positive. You will recall, Charlie himself said, "My greatest mistake was being with the wrong companions." Negative attitudes are often contagious, and bad habits are contagious. Let each of us look to our own associations and be certain to keep them on the highest possible level. One of the greatest services you can render to children is to motivate them to motivate themselves to select the right kind of friends and associates. Remember, vice is a monster of such awful mien that to be hated needs but to be seen, yet, seen too oft, familiar with his face, we first endure, then pity, then embrace. Another force with which every human being has to contend, and which, if not met with positive mental attitude, can cause physical, moral, and mental destruction is the power of sex. Sex presents the greatest challenge of change. Each human being had the power to choose for himself whether he will use the tremendous power of sex for good or for evil. Each human being must contend with the problems that will arise in his life because of sex. You can transmute sex into virtue or vice. One of God's greatest gifts to mankind is the power to procreate a human being. Sex is the means of procreation. It is power. Like all power, it can be used for good or for evil. Sex is a physical function of the body under the control of the subconscious and conscious mind. It is inherited. The physical sex organs, works of God, like all his creations, are good. The little difference that makes the big difference between the power of sex being a virtue or a vice is mental attitude. The inherent emotion of sex is one of the most powerful forces of the subconscious mind. The effects of its motivating power can be observed long before adolescence. This power blends with and intensifies the driving force of all other emotions. When it is in conflict with the will of the conscious mind, the power of imagination, as it affects the emotion of sex, has a tendency to win unless the conscious mind uses its power to affect, use, control or harmonize with the powers of the subconscious. You have the power to choose. Choose wisely, with positive mental attitude. Transmute sex into virtue. Thus you will win over one of the greatest problems you will ever have to face in your personal life. And you will be physically, mentally, and morally better. And what are the 7 virtues? Virtue is moral practice or action, moral excellence, rectitude, valor, chastity. The 7 virtues are prudence, fortitude, temperance, justice, faith, hope, and charity. 1. Prudence, the ability to govern and discipline oneself by the exercise of reason. 2. Fortitude, strength of mind that enables a person to encounter danger or bear pain or adversity with courage. It is the possession of the stamina essential to face that which repels or frightens one, or to put up with the hardships of a task imposed. It implies triumph. Synonyms are grit, backbone, pluck and guts. 3. Temperance, habitual moderation in the indulgence of the appetites and passions. 4. Justice, the principle or ideal of just dealing or right action, also conformity to this principle or ideal, integrity. 5. Faith, trust in God. 6. Hope, the desire with expectation of obtaining what is desired, or belief that it is obtainable. 7. Charity, the act of loving all men as brothers because they are sons of God. It stresses benevolence and goodwill in giving and in the broad understanding of others with kindly tolerance. How can you transmute the power of sex into the good and the beauty too? A crystal clear answer can be found by you if you search for it as you read and study this entire book. Results will be achieved when you relate and assimilate the principles into your own life. But one must gain knowledge for himself. The following suggestions may be helpful as you search for your answer while reading. 1. Keep your mind on the things you want and off the things you don't want. This means that you keep your mind on immediate, intermediate, and distant desirable objectives. The instinct of sex in the subconscious mind will be patient if it has hope that you will fulfill life's mission. The boy or girl who is truly in love and plans to marry will not have the sex problems he or she might otherwise have. 2. If there were more and often earlier marriages, there would be fewer sex problems. Life's mission to procreate is fulfilled in marriage, however, marry for love beyond the sex instinct. 3. Lead a well-balanced, foursquare life. 4. Work long hours at a labor of love. It will keep you busy, occupy your thoughts, and use up surplus energy. 5. Develop a magnificent obsession. Study the significance to be found in Chapter 15. 6. Relate and assimilate into your own life the concepts in Chapter 2, You Can Change Your World, and Chapter 7, Learn to See. 7. Select environment that will develop you best towards your objectives. 8. Choose the self-motivators for self-suggestion that you believe will help you. Memorize them. They will flash from your subconscious mind to your conscious mind as autosuggestion. Not all the problems of one's personal life, however, are of so deep and penetrating a nature. Many times all that it takes to meet an immediate problem is quick thinking, adaptability, and taking a second look at the situation which is causing the problem. It often takes only one idea, followed by action, to turn failure into success. It takes only one idea, followed by action, to succeed when others fail. In 1939 on Chicago's North Michigan Avenue, in an area now known as the Magnificent Mile, office space was going begging. Building after building had empty floors, one that was half rented was considered lucky. It was a bad year for business and negative mental attitude hung over Chicago real estate like a cloud. You heard such comments as, "No sense in advertising, there just isn't the money around," or, "What can you do? You can't fight the times." Then into this gloomy picture came a building manager with positive mental attitude. He had an idea. And he got into action. This man was hired by Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company to run a large building on North Michigan Avenue which they had acquired in a mortgage foreclosure. When he took the job, the building was only 10% occupied. Within 1 year it was 100% rented, with a long waiting list. What was the secret? The new manager accepted the problem of no demand for offices as a challenge rather than a misfortune. Here is what he did as he explained in an interview. "I knew precisely what I wanted. I wanted to have the premises 100% occupied with choice, substantial tenants. I knew that under the prevailing conditions it was likely that the offices would not be rented for possibly several years. I therefore concluded that we had everything to gain and nothing to lose by doing the following. 1. I would seek out desirable, prospective tenants of my choice. 2. I would stimulate the imagination of each prospect. I would offer him the most beautiful offices in the city of Chicago. 3. I would offer him these superior offices at a rental no higher than the one he was now paying. 4. Furthermore, I would assume responsibility for his present lease, provided he paid us the same monthly rental under a 1-year lease. 5. In addition to all this, I would offer redecoration without cost to the tenant. I would employ creative architects and interior decorators and remodel the offices of my building to suit the personal taste of each new tenant." I reasoned. 1. If an office were not rented during the next few years, we would receive no income from that office. So we had nothing to lose by going into such arrangements as are above described. We might come out at the end of the year with no income, but we would be no worse off than we would have been if we had not acted. And we would be better off because, we would have satisfied tenants who would in future years supply dependable rentals. 2. Furthermore, it is an established custom to rent offices on a 1-year basis only. In most cases, there would be only a few months left to run on the old lease of my new tenant. Promising to assume these rentals was therefore not too great a risk. 3. If a tenant should vacate at the end of his year, it would be comparatively easy to re-rent in a well-filled building. The redecoration of his office would not be money lost, as it would have increased the equity value of the entire building. The result was marvelous. Each newly redecorated office seemed to be more beautiful than the one that had preceded it. The tenants were so enthused that many expended additional sums. In one instance, a tenant spent an additional $22,000 in remodeling. So at the end of a year the building which had started off only 10% rented was 100% rented. None of the tenants wanted to leave after his lease expired. They were happy with their new, ultra-modern offices. And we gained their permanent goodwill by not raising the rents at the expiration of their first 1 year's lease. We would like you to think back over this story. Here was a man faced with a most serious problem. He had a giant office building on his hands that had 9 empty offices in it for every one that was occupied. And yet within a year, his building was 100% rented. Now right next door, up and down the magnificent mile, there were dozens of office buildings standing idle and practically empty. The difference of course was the mental attitude which each individual building manager brought to the problem. One man said, "I have a problem. That's awful." The other said, "I have a problem. That's good." A man who seizes upon his problems as opportunities in disguise and scrutinizes them for the good element that is going to be there, is the man who understands the very core of positive mental attitude. The man who develops an idea that can work and follows it with action will turn failure into success. Time after time the pattern repeats itself, problems and difficulties turn out to be the best things that could have happened to us, provided we translate them into advantages. As you recognize, the problem which the building manager faced occurred during the Depression. Things were still plenty tough in 1939 when he solved this problem. But they had been much worse. Now the economic problems of the nation and of the world arose as the result of the Depression. Depressions are caused by cycles in the economic life of a nation or nations. But it is not necessary to sit idly by. There is no need to be beaten and tossed to and fro by the cycles of life. You can meet the problem of cycles and conquer it intelligently. In so doing, you can often acquire a fortune. Make a fortune or achieve your aims by understanding cycles and trends. Many years ago Paul Raymond, vice president in charge of loans for the American National Bank and Trust Company of Chicago, rendered a service bank's customers. He sent them Dewey and Dakin's book Cycles. Subsequently many of these clients made fortunes. They learned and understood the theory of business cycles and trends. Some of them will be among those who won't lose the fortunes they acquired regardless of economic trends and changes. Edward R. Dewey, who has been the director for the Foundation for the Study of Cycles for many years, points out that every living organism, be it an individual, business, or nation, grows to maturity, levels off, and dies. What is equally important, he indicates a solution whereby, regardless of the trend or cycle, you, as an individual, can do something about it. You can meet the challenge of change successfully. You can change the trend as far as you and your interests are concerned, regardless of the general trend, with new life, new blood, new ideas, new activity. He anticipated a downward cycle and prepared to go upward. Before newspapers publicized the recession that began in the latter part of 1957, one of the bank's clients got into action. His organization went after business aggressively with a positive mental attitude. In 1958 his company developed a premium increase of over 30% compared to the previous year, which had shown a 25% increase. The entire industry, however, had a downward trend. Sometimes the cycle that presents a problem is not a cycle that affects an industry, or an entire nation. It may be a cycle within an individual business only. This problem, too, can be anticipated and met. Witness the continual growth of many American corporations, in spite of the fact that in the normal course of events they would have grown to maturity, leveled off, and died. E.I. DuPont de Nemours and Company, Inc., is an outstanding example. They met the challenge with new life, new blood, new ideas, new activity. It is unnecessary to point out that E.I. DuPont de Nemours and Company, Inc. has continued to grow. But what is the cause of its success? Why has it not followed the natural cycle of growing to maturity, leveling off, and dying? DuPont has met the challenge of change with new life, new blood, new ideas, new activity. Its executives have met this problem with positive mental attitude and the determination to overcome it. They have continued to engage in research and are constantly making new discoveries, developing new products, and perfecting their previous products. They inject new blood into their management, and study and improve their sales methods. Learn from their success. The owner of a small business, or you as an individual, can study and experiment. You can relate and assimilate the principles used by such a large corporation. You too can continue to grow with booster shots of new ideas, new life, new blood, new activity. You can change a downward trend into an upward one. You can be different. When others float downstream, you can move upstream. So many of the stories you have read and will read in this book indicate that, if you have a problem, that's good. It's good if you learn to see how to turn adversity into seeds of equivalent or greater benefit. You may still not see the principle, however, the next chapter entitled Learn to See can help you. Pilot number 6, Thoughts to Steer By. 1. So you've got a problem. That's good. Why? Because every time you meet a problem and tackle and conquer it with positive mental attitude, you become a better, bigger and more successful person. 2. Everyone has problems. Those with positive mental attitude turn their adversities into seeds of equivalent or greater benefits. 3. Your success, or failure, in meeting the problems presented by the challenges of change will be determined by your mental attitude. 4. You can direct your thoughts, control your emotions and ordain your destiny by recognizing, relating, assimilating and applying the principles that are applicable to you to be found in this book. 5. God is always a good God. 6. When you have a problem, A. Ask for divine guidance, B. Think, C. State the problem, and D. Analyze it, E. Adopt the positive mental attitude, that's good. F. Then change the adversity into seeds of greater benefit. 7. Charlie Ward is an outstanding example of a man who successfully met the challenges of change. Prepare to meet the challenges of change by developing positive mental attitude. 8. Sex is the greatest challenge of change. Transmute the emotion of sex into virtue. 9. The 7 virtues are prudence, fortitude, temperance, justice, faith, hope, and charity. Success through a positive mental attitude indicates how you can relate and assimilate these qualities into your own life. 10. One good idea followed by action can change failure into success. You've got a problem. That's good. For it's the seeds of greater benefits for those who have positive mental attitude. Success through a positive mental attitude, by Napoleon Hill and WClementStone, 1959. Chapter 7, Learn to See. When he was born, George W. Campbell was blind. Bilateral congenital cataracts, the doctor called it. George's father looked at the doctor, not wanting to believe. Isn't there anything you can do? Wouldn't an operation help? No, said the doctor. As of now, we know of no way to treat this condition. George Campbell couldn't see, but the love and faith of his parents made his life rich. As a very young boy, he did not know that he was missing anything. And then, when George was 6 years old, something happened which he wasn't able to understand. One afternoon he was playing with another youngster. The other boy, forgetting that George was blind, tossed a ball to him. Look out. It'll hit you. The ball did hit George, and nothing in his life was quite the same after that. George was not hurt, but he was greatly puzzled. Later he asked his mother, "How could Bill know what's going to happen to me before I know it?" His mother sighed, for now the moment she dreaded had arrived. Now it was necessary for her to tell her son for the first time, "You are blind." And here is how she did it. "Sit down, George," she said softly as she reached over and took one of his hands. "I may not be able to describe it to you, and you may not be able to understand, but let me try to explain it this way. And sympathetically she took one of his little hands in hers and started counting the fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These fingers are similar to what is known as the five senses. She touched each finger between her thumb and index finger in sequence as she continued the explanation. This little finger for hearing, this little finger for touch, this little finger for smell, this one for taste, and then she hesitated before continuing, this little finger for sight. And each of the five senses, like each of the five fingers, sends messages to your brain. Then she closed the little finger which she had named sight and tied it so that it would stay next to the palm of George's hand. "George, you are different from other boys," she explained, "because you have the use of only four senses, like four fingers: 1, hearing, 2, touch, 3, smell, and 4, taste. But you don't have the use of your sense of sight. Now I want to show you something." "Stand up," she said gently. George stood up. His mother picked up his ball. "Now hold out your hand as if you were going to catch this," she said. George held out his hands, and in a moment he felt the hard ball hit his fingers. He closed them tightly around it and caught it. "Fine. Fine," said his mother. "I never want you to forget what you have just done. You can catch a ball with 4 fingers instead of 5, George. You can also catch and hold a full and happy life with 4 senses instead of 5, if you get in there and keep trying." Now George's mother had used a metaphor, and such a simple figure of speech is one of the quickest and most effective methods of communicating ideas between persons. George never forgot the symbol of 4 fingers instead of 5. It meant to him the symbol of hope. And whenever he became discouraged because of his handicap, he used the symbol as a self-motivator. It became a form of self-suggestion to him. For he would repeat 4 fingers instead of 5 frequently. At times of need it would flash from his subconscious to his conscious mind. And he found that his mother was right. He was able to catch a full life, and hold it with the use of the 4 senses which he did have. But George Campbell's story doesn't end here. In the middle of his junior year at high school the boy became ill, and it was necessary for him to go to the hospital. While George was convalescing, his father brought him information from which he learned that science had developed a cure for congenital cataracts. Of course, there was a chance of failure, but the chances for success far outweighed those for failure. George wanted so much to see that he was willing to risk failure in order to see. During the next 6 months 4 delicate surgical operations were performed, 2 on each eye. For days George lay in the darkened hospital room with bandages over his eyes. And finally the day came for the bandages to be removed. Slowly, carefully, the doctor unwound the gauze from around George's head and over his eyes. There was only a blur of light. George Campbell was still technically blind. For one awful moment he lay thinking. And then he heard the doctor moving beside his bed. Something was being placed over his eyes. "Now, can you see?" came the doctor's question. George raised his head slightly from the pillow. The blur of light became color, the color of form, a figure. "George," a voice said. He recognized the voice. It was his mother's voice. For the first time in his 18 years of life George Campbell was seeing his mother. There were the tired eyes, the wrinkled, 62-year-old face, and the knotted and gnarled hands. But to George she was most beautiful. To him, she was an angel. The years of toil and patience, the years of teaching and planning, the years of being his seeing eyes, the love and affection, that was what George saw. To this day he treasures his first visual picture, the sight of his mother. And, as you will see, he learned an appreciation for his sense of sight from this first experience. "None of us can understand," he says, "the miracle of sight, unless we have had to do without it. Seeing is a learned process." But George also learned something that is very helpful to anyone interested in the study of positive mental attitude. He will never forget the day he saw his mother standing before him in the hospital room, and did not know who she was, or even what she was, until he heard her speak. What we see, George points out, is always an interpretation of the mind. We have to train the mind to interpret what we see. This observation is backed up by science. Most of the process of seeing is not done by the eyes at all, says Dr. Samuel Renshaw, in describing the mental process of seeing. The eyes act as hands which reach out there and grab meaningless things and bring them into the brain. The brain then turns the things over to the memory. It is not until the brain interprets in terms of comparative action that we really see anything. Some of us go through life seeing very little of the power and the glory around us. We do not properly filter the information that our eyes give us through the mental processes of the brain. As a result, we often behold things without really seeing them at all. We receive physical impressions without grasping their meaning to us. We do not, in other words, put positive mental attitude to work on the impressions that are sent to our brain. Is it time to have your mental vision checked? Not your physical vision, that is a matter for the medical specialists. But mental vision, like physical vision, can become distorted. When it does, you can grope in a haze of false concepts, bumping and hurting yourself and others unnecessarily. The most common physical weaknesses of the eye are two opposite extremes, nearsightedness and farsightedness. These are the major distortions of mental vision, too. The person who is mentally nearsighted is apt to overlook objects and possibilities that are distant. He pays attention only to the problems immediately at hand and is blind to the opportunities that could be his by thinking and planning in terms of the future. You are nearsighted if you do not make plans, form objectives, and lay the foundation for the future. On the other hand, the mentally far-sighted person is apt to overlook possibilities that are right before him. He does not see the opportunities at hand. He sees only a dream world of the future, unrelated to the present. He wants to start at the top rather than move up step by step, and he does not recognize that the only job where you can start at the top is the job of digging a hole. They looked and recognized what they saw. So, in the process of learning to see, you will want to develop both your near sight and your far sight. The advantages to the man who knows how to see what is directly in front of him are enormous. For years the people in the little town of Darby, Montana, used to look up at what they called Crystal Mountain. The mountain was given this name because erosion had exposed a ledge of a lightly sparkling crystal that looked something like rock salt. A pack trail was built directly across the outcropping as early as 1937. But it wasn't until the year 1951 to 14 years later, that anyone bothered to stoop down, pick up a piece of the sparkling material, and really look at it. It was in this year 1951 that two Darby men, Mr. A. E. Cumley and Mr. L. I. Thompson, saw a mineral collection displayed in the town. Thompson and Cumley became very excited. There in the mineral display were specimens of beryl which, according to the attached card, was used in atomic energy research. Immediately Thompson and Cumley staked claims on Crystal Mountain. Thompson sent a specimen of the ore to the Bureau of Mines office in Spokane, together with a request to send an examiner to see a very large deposit of the mineral. Later that year the Bureau of Mines sent a bulldozer up the mountain and scraped off enough of the outcropping to determine that here indeed was one of the world's greatest deposits of extremely valuable beryllium. Today, heavy earth-moving trucks struggle up the mountain and work their way back down again, weighted down with the extremely heavy ore, while at the bottom, virtually waiting with dollar bills in their hands, are representatives of a United States Steel Company and the United States government, each anxious to buy the highly valued ore. All because one day two young men not only observed with their eyes, but took the trouble to see with their minds. Today these men are well on their way to being multimillionaires. A mentally far-sighted person could not have done what Thompson and Cumley did, if his mental vision were distorted. For he is the man who can see only far-off values while the advantages that lie at his feet go unclaimed. Are there fortunes right at your doorstep? Look about you. As you go about your daily chores, are there small areas of irritation? Perhaps you can think of a way to overcome them, a way that will be helpful not only to yourself but to others. Many a man has made a fortune by meeting such homely needs. This was so of the man who invented the bobby pin and the one who devised the paperclip. It was so of the man who invented the zipper, and the metal pants fastener. Look about you. Learn to see. You may find acres of diamonds in your own backyard. But mental nearsightedness can be just as much of a problem as mental farsightedness. The man with this problem sees only what is under his nose, while more distant possibilities go unclaimed. He is the man who does not understand the power of a plan. He does not understand the value of thinking time. He is so busy with the problems that immediately confront him that he does not free his mind to range into the distance, reaching for new opportunities, seeking trends, getting the big picture. Being able to see into the future is one of the most spectacular accomplishments of the human brain. Down in the heart of the Citrus Belt in Florida there is a little town called Winter Haven. The surrounding country is farmland. Certainly it would be considered by most people as an area entirely unsuited for a large tourist attraction. It is isolated. It has no beach, no mountains, only mile after mile of gently rolling hills with little lakes and cypress swamps down in the valleys. But to this region came a man who saw these cypress swamps with an eye that others had not used. His name was Richard Pope. Dick Pope bought one of these old cypress swamps, put a fence around it, and has turned down offers of at least $1 million for the world-famous cypress gardens. Of course, it really wasn't as simple as that. All along the line Dick Pope had to see opportunities in his situation. For instance, there was the question of advertising. Pope knew that the only way he would be able to draw the public into such an isolated place was through a barrage of advertising. But ads cost money. So what Dick Pope did was quite simple. He went into the popular photography business. He set up a photo supply house at Cypress Gardens, sold his visitors film and then taught them how to take spectacular shots of the garden. He hired skilled water skiers. He put them through intricate performances while over a loudspeaker he announced to the public exactly what camera settings they should use in order to catch the action. And then, of course, when these travelers went back home, the very best trip pictures were always of Cypress Gardens. They gave Dick Pope the very best kind of advertising there is, word-of-mouth recommendations, with pictures. This is the kind of creative seeing that we all need to develop. We need to learn how to look at our world with fresh eyes, seeing the opportunities that lie all about us, but simultaneously looking into the future for the chances that are there. Seeing is a learned skill. But like any skill it must be exercised. See another person's abilities, capacities and viewpoint. We may think we recognize our own talents, yet in this respect we may be blind. Let's illustrate with an example of a teacher who needed to have her mental vision checked. She was both nearsighted and farsighted. For she could not see either the present or the future potential abilities and capacities of her students, or their points of view. Now everyone, the great and the near great, had to have a starting point. They weren't born brilliant and successful. As a matter of fact, some of our greatest men were regarded as quite stupid at times during their lives. It was not until they grasped a positive mental attitude and learned to comprehend their capabilities and envision definite goals that they started their climbs to success. But there was one young man, in particular, whom his teachers thought a stupid, muddle-headed blockhead. The youngster sat and drew pictures on his slate. He looked about and listened to everybody else. He asked impossible questions, but refused to reveal what he knew, even under the threat of punishment. The children called him dunce, and he generally stood at the foot of his class. And this boy was Thomas Alva Edison. You will be inspired when you read the life story of Thomas A. Edison. He attended primary school for a total period of less than 3 months. The teacher and his schoolmates told him that he was stupid. Yet, he became an educated man after an incident in his life prompted him to turn his talisman from negative mental attitude to positive mental attitude. He developed into a gifted person. He became a great inventor. What was that incident? What happened to Edison that changed his whole attitude? He told his mother about hearing the teacher tell the inspector at school that he was addled and it wouldn't be worthwhile to keep him in school any longer. His mother marched off to school with him and told all within range of her voice that her son, Thomas Alva Edison, had more brains than the teacher or the inspector. Edison called his mother the most enthusiastic champion a boy ever had. And from that day forward he was a changed boy. He said, "She cast over me an influence which has lasted all my life. The good effects of her early training I can never lose. My mother was always kind, always sympathetic, and she never misunderstood or misjudged me." His mother's belief in him caused him to view himself in an entirely different light. It caused him to turn his talisman to positive mental attitude and take a positive mental attitude regarding studying and learning. This attitude taught Edison to view things with deeper mental insight, that enabled him to comprehend and develop inventions which benefited mankind. Perhaps the teacher didn't see because the teacher wasn't genuinely interested in helping the boy. His mother was. You have a tendency to see what you want to see. To hear does not necessarily imply attention or application. To listen always does. Throughout success through a positive mental attitude we urge you to listen to the message. This means, to see how you can relate and assimilate the principle into your own life. Perhaps you'd like to see how you can relate the principle of the following experience into your own life. Dr. Roy Plunkett, a DuPont chemist, made an experiment. He failed. When he opened the test tube after the experiment, he observed that it apparently contained nothing. He was curious. He asked himself, why? He didn't throw the tube away as others might have done under similar circumstances. Instead, he weighed the tube. And, to his surprise, it weighed more than a tube of like make and design. So, again, Dr. Plunkett asked himself, why? In searching for the answer to his questions, he discovered that marvelous transparent plastic, tetrafluoroethylene, commonly known as Teflon. During the Korean War, the United States government contracted for DuPont's entire output. When there is something you don't understand, ask yourself, why? Look at it more closely. You may make a great discovery. Ask yourself 2 questions. Asking yourself or others questions about things that puzzle you may reward you richly. This very procedure led to one of the world's greatest scientific discoveries. A young Englishman, while vacationing on his grandmother's farm, was relaxing. He was lying on his back under an apple tree and engaging in thinking time. An apple fell to the ground. This young man was a student of higher mathematics. Why does the apple fall to the ground? He asked himself. Does the earth attract the apple? Does the apple attract the earth? Does each attract the other? What is the universal principle involved? Isaac Newton used his power to think and he made a discovery. To see mentally is to think. He found the answers he was looking for. The earth and the apple attracted each other, and the law of attraction of mass to mass applies to the entire universe. Newton discovered the law of gravitation because he was observant and sought the answers to what he observed. Another man, because he exercised his powers of observation and acted upon what he perceived, found happiness and great wealth. Newton asked himself questions. The other man sought expert advice. He became wealthy because he accepted advice. In Toba, Japan, in the year 1869, when he was just 11 years old, Kokichi Mikimoto continued his father's business as the village noodle maker. His father had developed an illness that prevented him from working. The youngster supported his 6 brothers, 3 sisters, and his parents. In addition to making the noodles daily, young Mikimoto had to sell them. He proved to be a good salesman. Mikimoto had previously been tutored by a samurai who taught. Exemplification of true faith consists of acts of kindness and love for one's fellow men, not mere formal prayers uttered by rote. And with this basic positive mental attitude philosophy of positive action, Mikimoto became a doer. He developed the habit of converting ideas into reality. At the age of 20 he fell in love with the daughter of a samurai. The young man knew that his future father-in-law would not bless his daughter's marriage with a noodle maker. Therefore, he was motivated to harmonize with this known power. He changed his occupation and became a pearl merchant. Like many persons who achieve success in any part of the world, Mikimoto kept searching for specific knowledge that would help him in his new activity. He, like the great industrialists of our day, sought help from a university. Professor Yoshikichi Mizukuri told Mikimoto of a theory of one of the laws of nature that had never been proved. The professor said, "A pearl is formed in an oyster when a foreign object, like a grain of sand, is stuck in the oyster. If the foreign object does not kill the oyster, nature covers the object with the same secretion that forms the mother of pearl in the lining of the oyster's shell." Mikimoto was thrilled. He could hardly wait to get the answer to the question he asked himself: can I raise pearls by deliberately planting a tiny foreign object in the oyster and letting nature take its course? He converted a theory into a positive action once he learned to see. Mikimoto had been taught to see by that university professor. And then he used the power of his imagination. He engaged in creative thinking. He used deductive reasoning. He decided that if all pearls were formed only when a foreign object entered the oyster, he could develop pearls by using nature's laws. He could plant foreign objects in the oysters and force them to produce pearls. He learned to observe and act, and he became a successful man. Now a study of Mikimoto's life indicates that he employed all the 17 success principles. For knowledge doesn't make you successful, but application of the knowledge will. Action. Many of the ideas which come to us as we learn to see with fresh eyes will strike others as bold. These ideas can either frighten us or, if we act on them, make our fortunes. Here is another true story of pearls. This time the hero is a young American, Joseph Goldstone. He sold jewelry to Iowa farmers, door to door. Then one day in the heart of the Depression he learned that the Japanese were producing beautiful cultured pearls. Here was quality, and it could be sold at a fraction of the cost of natural pearls. Joe saw a great opportunity. In spite of the fact that it was a Depression year, he and his wife, Esther, converted all their tangible assets into cash and set out for Tokyo. They landed in Japan with less than $1,000, but they had their plan and lots of positive mental attitude. They obtained an interview with Mr. K. Kitamura, head of the Japanese Pearl Dealers Association. Joe was aiming high. He told Mr. Kitamura of his plan for merchandising Japanese cultured pearls in the United States, and asked Mr. Kitamura for an initial credit of $100,000 in pearls. This was a fantastic sum, especially in a period of depression. After several days, however, Mr. Kitamura agreed. The pearls sold well. The Goldstones were well on their way to becoming wealthy. A few years later, they decided they wanted to establish their own pearl farm, which they did with the help of Mr. Kitamura. Once again they saw opportunity where others had seen nothing. Experience proved that the mortality rate of oysters into which a foreign object had been artificially inserted was over 50%. How can we eliminate this great loss, they asked themselves. After much study, the Goldstones began to use on the oysters the methods employed in hospital rooms. The outside shells were scraped and scrubbed to reduce the danger of infection to the oyster. The surgeon used a liquid anesthetic that relaxed the oyster. Then he slipped a tiny clam pellet into each oyster as a nucleus for the pearl that was to be formed. The incision was made with a sterilized scalpel. Then the oyster was put into a cage, and the cage was dropped back into the water. Every 4 months cages were raised and the oysters were given a physical checkup. Through these techniques, 90% of the oysters lived and developed pearls, and the Goldstones went on to acquire a fabulous fortune. Time and again we see how men and women have become successful after they learned to apply mental perception. The ability to see is much more than the physical process of taking light rays through the retina of the eye. It is the skill of interpreting what you see and applying that interpretation to your life and the lives of others. Learning to see will bring to you opportunities that you never dreamed existed. However, There is more to success through positive mental attitude than learning mental perception. You must also learn to act on what you learn. Action is important because through action you get things done. Don't wait any longer. Read The Secret of Getting Things Done in the next chapter and move another rung up the ladder of success through positive mental attitude. Pilot number 7, Thoughts to Steer By. 1. Learn to see. Seeing is a learned process. 9/10 of seeing takes place in the brain. 2. 4 fingers instead of 5, this was the symbol whereby George Campbell, the blind boy, could catch and hold a full and happy life. How can you use this symbol? 3. Seeing is learned through association. George Campbell's first sight of his mother became meaningful to him only when he recognized her voice. 4. Is it time to have your mental vision checked? When it is distorted, you can grope around in a haze of false concepts, bumping and hurting yourself and others unnecessarily. Does your mental vision become clearer year by year? 5. Take a look, a good look, and recognize what you see. There may be acres of diamonds in your own backyard. 6. Don't be nearsighted, look to the future. Cypress Gardens became a reality because Richard Pope saw it as a definite future objective. 7. See another person's abilities, capacities, and viewpoint. You may be overlooking a genius. The story of Thomas Edison is a good example. 8. Do you see how you can relate and assimilate the principles of success through a positive mental attitude into your own life? 9. Learn from nature. How? Ask yourself some questions, as Isaac Newton did. If you don't know the answers, get expert advice. 10. Convert what you see into reality by action. Mikimoto converted a theory into a fortune in pearls. Goldstone recognized, related and applied the principles and methods used in hospitals to save human lives as being applicable to saving the lives of oysters in producing cultured pearls. Open your mind and learn to see. Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude, by Napoleon Hill and W.Clementstone, 1959. Chapter 8, The Secret of Getting Things Done. In this chapter you will find the secret of getting things done. You will also receive a self-motivator so powerful that it will subconsciously force you to desirable action, for it is in reality a self-starter. Yet you can use it at will. When you do, you overcome procrastination and inertia. If you do the things you don't want to do, or if you don't do the things that you do want to do, then this chapter is for you. Those who achieve greatness employ this secret of getting things done. Take, for example, Maryknoll Father James Keller. Father Keller had been developing an idea for quite some time. He hoped to motivate little people to do big things by encouraging each to reach beyond his or her own little circle to the outside world. The biblical command, "Go ye forth into all the world," was to him the symbol of an idea whereby the mission he had in mind could be fulfilled. When he responded to this command, he employed the secret of getting things done. And when he did, he went into action. This happened in 1945. It was then that he organized the Christophers, an organization most unusual. It has no chapters, no committees, no meetings, no dues. It doesn't even have a membership in the usual sense of the word. It simply consists of people, no one can say how many, dedicated to an ideal. The Christophers operate on the concept that it is better for people to do something and pay nothing, than to pay dues and do nothing. What is the ideal to which each is dedicated? Each Christopher is dedicated to carry his religion with him wherever he goes throughout the day, into the dust and heat of the marketplace, into the highways and byways, into the home. And thus he brings the major truths of his faith to others. The thrilling story is told by the Reverend James Keller in You Can Change the World. It came about because he conceived and believed in an ideal. But he did little or nothing about it until he responded to the secret of getting things done. You get the feel of this secret from the statement of E. Bauermeister, Supervisor of Education and Correctional Counselor at California Institution for Men, Chino, California, who told the authors. I always tell the men in our self-adjustment class that too often what we read and profess becomes a part of our libraries and our vocabularies, instead of becoming a part of our lives. Remember the biblical statement, "For the good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do." Now how can you train yourself to get into action immediately when it is desirable? And then we told Mr. Bauermeister how the good things we read and profess can become a part of our lives. We gave him the self-starter for getting things done. How do you make the secret of getting things done a part of your life? By habit. And you develop habit through repetition. Sow an action and you reap a habit, sow a habit and you reap a character, sow a character and you reap a destiny, said the great psychologist and philosopher William James. He was saying that you are what your habits make you. And you can choose your habits. You can develop any habit you wish when you use the self-starter. Now what is the secret of getting things done and what is the self-starter that forces you to use this great secret? The secret of getting things done is to act. The self-starter is the self-motivator. Do it now. As long as you live, never say to yourself, "Do it now," unless you follow through with desirable action. Whenever action is desirable and the symbol "do it now" flashes from your subconscious mind to your conscious mind, immediately act. Make it a practice to respond to me self-starter. Do it now. In little things. You will quickly develop the habit of a reflex response so powerful that in times of emergency or when opportunity presents itself, you will act. Say you have a phone call that you should make but you have a tendency to procrastinate. And you have put off making that phone call. When the self-starter "do it now" flashes from your subconscious to your conscious mind, act. Make that phone call immediately. Or suppose, for example, that you set your alarm clock for 6 a.m. Yet when the alarm goes off, you feel sleepy, get up, turn off the alarm, and go back to bed. You will have a tendency to develop a habit to do the same thing in the future. But if your subconscious mind flashes to the conscious "do it now," then come what may, do it now. Stay up. Why? You want to develop the habit of responding to the self-starter "do it now." In Chapter 13 you will read how one of the authors bought a company with $1,600,000 in net liquid assets with the seller's own money. This became a reality because at the proper time the buyer responded to the self-starter. Do it now. Now H. G. Wells learned the secret of getting things done. And H. G. Wells was a prolific writer because he did. He tried never to let a good idea slip away from him. While an idea was fresh, he immediately wrote down the thought that occurred to him. This would sometimes happen in the middle of the night. No matter. Wells would switch on the light, reach for the pencil and paper that were always beside his bed and scribble away. And then he would drop off to sleep again. Ideas that might have been forgotten were recalled when he refreshed his memory by looking at the flashes of inspiration that had been written down immediately when they occurred. This habit of Wells was as natural and effortless to him as smiling is to you when a happy thought occurs. Many persons have the habit of procrastination. Because of it, they may miss a train, be late for work, or even more important, miss an opportunity that could change the whole course of their lives for the better. History has recorded how battles have been lost. Someone put off taxing desirable action. New students in our Positive Mental Attitude Science of Success course sometimes state that the procrastination habit is the one they would like to eliminate. And then we reveal to them the secret of getting things done. We give them the self-starter. We may motivate them by telling them the true story of what the self-starter meant to a war prisoner in World War II. What the self-starter meant to a war prisoner. Kenneth Irwin Harmon was a civilian employee for the Navy at Manila when the Japanese landed there. He was captured and held in a hotel for 2 days before he was sent to a prison camp. On the first day, Kenneth saw that his roommate had a book under his pillow. "May I borrow it?" he asked. The book was Think and Grow Rich. Kenneth began to read. As he read, he met the most important living person with the invisible talisman imprinted with positive mental attitude on one side and negative mental attitude on the reverse. Before he started to read it, he had the feeling of despair. He fearfully looked ahead to possible torture, even death, in the prison camp. But now as he read, his attitude became one inspired by hope. He had a craving to own the book. He wanted it with him during the dread days ahead. In discussing Think and Grow Rich with his fellow prisoner, he realized that the book meant a great deal to the owner. "Let me copy it," he said. "Sure, go ahead," was the response. Kenneth Harmon employed the secret of getting things done. He swung into immediate action. In a fury of activity he began typing away. Word by word, page by page, chapter by chapter. Because he was obsessed with the possibility that it would be taken away at any moment, he was motivated to work night and day. It was a good thing that he did, for within an hour after the last page was completed, his captors led him away to the notorious Santo Tomas prison camp. He had finished in time because he started in time. Kenneth Harmon kept the manuscript with him during the 3 years and 1 month he was a prisoner. He read it again and again. And it gave him food for thought. It inspired him to develop courage, make plans for the future, and retain his mental and physical health. Many prisoners at Santo Tomas were permanently injured physically and mentally by malnutrition and fear of the present and fear of the future. But I was better when I left Santo Tomas than when I was interned, better prepared for life, more mentally alert, Kenneth Harmon told us. You get the feel of his thinking in his statement: success must be continually practiced, or it will take wings and fly away. Now is the time to act. For the secret of getting things done can change a person's attitude from negative to positive. A day that might have been ruined can become a pleasant day. The day that might have been wasted. Jørgen Juldal, a student at the University of Copenhagen, worked one summer as a tourist guide. Because he cheerfully did much more than he was paid to do, some visitors from Chicago made arrangements for him to tour America. The itinerary included a day of sightseeing in Washington, D.C., while he was en route to Chicago. On arriving in Washington, Jørgen checked in at the Willard Hotel, where his bill had been prepaid. He was sitting on top of the world. In his coat pocket was his lane ticket to Chicago, in his hip pocket was his wallet with his passport and money. Then the young man was dealt a shocking blow. While getting ready for bed, he found that his wallet was missing. He ran downstairs to the hotel desk. "We'll do everything we can," said the manager. But the next morning the wallet had still not been located. Jørgen Juldal had less than $2 change in his pockets. Alone in a foreign country, he wondered what he should do. Wire his friends in Chicago and tell them what had happened. Go to the Danish embassy and report the lost passport. Sit at police headquarters until they had some news. Then, all of a sudden, he said, "No. I won't do any of these things. I'll see Washington. I may never be here again. I have one precious day in this great capital. After all, I still have my ticket to get me to Chicago tonight, and there'll be plenty of time then to solve the problem of the money and the passport. But if I don't see Washington now, I may never see it. I've walked miles at home, I'll enjoy walking here. Now is the time to be happy. I am the same man that I was yesterday before I lost my wallet. I was happy then, I should be happy now, just to be in America, just to have the privilege of enjoying a holiday in this great city. I won't waste my time in futile unhappiness over my loss." And so he headed off, on foot. He saw the White House and the Capitol, he visited the great museums, he climbed to the top of the Washington Monument. He wasn't able to take the tour of Arlington and some other places he'd wanted to see. But what he did see, he saw more thoroughly. He bought peanuts and candy and nibbled on them to keep from getting too hungry. And when he got back to Denmark, the part of his American trip he remembered best was that day on foot in Washington, a day that might have gotten away from Jørgen Juldal if he had not employed the secret of getting things done. For he knew the truth in the statement. Now is the time. He knew that now must be seized before it becomes, yesterday I could have. Incidentally, to round off his story, 5 days after that eventful day Washington police found both wallet and passport and sent them to him. Are you scared of your own best ideas? One of the things that often prevents us from seizing the now is a certain timidity in the face of our own inspirations. We're a little bit afraid of our ideas when they first occur to us. They may seem novel or far-fetched. There's no doubt about it, it takes a certain boldness to step out on an untested idea. Yet it's exactly this kind of boldness that often produces the most spectacular results. The well-known writer, Elsie Lee, tells about Ruth Butler and her sister Eleanor, the daughters of a nationally known New York furrier. My father was a frustrated painter, says Ruth. He had talent, but the need to earn a living left him no time to build a reputation as an artist. So he collected painting. Later, he started buying paintings for Eleanor and me. Thus, the girls developed a knowledge and appreciation fine art, along with an impeccable sense of taste. As they grew older, friends would consult them on what types of paintings they should buy for their homes. Often they would loan pieces from their collection for brief periods. One day Eleanor woke Ruth up at 3 a.m. Don't start arguing, but I have a terrific idea. We're going to form a mastermind alliance. Now what in the world is a mastermind alliance? Ruth asked. A mastermind alliance is coordination of knowledge and effort, in a spirit of harmony, between two or more people, for the attainment of a definite purpose. And that's just what we're going to do. We're going into the business of renting paintings. And Ruth agreed. It was a terrific idea. They set to work the same day, although friends tried to warn them of dangers. Their valued paintings might be lost or stolen, and there might be lawsuits and insurance problems. But they went right on working, accumulating $300 in capital and talking their father into loaning them the basement of his fur shop, rent-free. We hauled 1,800 paintings from our own collections in among the coat forms, Ruth recalls, and ignored father's sad and disapproving eyes. The first year was grim, a real struggle. But the novel idea paid off. Their company, known as the New York Circulating Library of Paintings, became a success, with about 500 paintings constantly on rental to business firms, doctors, lawyers, and for use in homes. One valued client was an inmate of the Massachusetts Penitentiary for 8 years. He wrote humbly that perhaps the library wouldn't rent to him, considering his address. The paintings went to him rent-free except for transportation costs. In return Ruth and Eleanor received a letter from prison authorities telling how the paintings were used in an art appreciation course that benefited many hundreds of prisoners. Ruth and Eleanor started their business with an idea. And then they backed their idea up with immediate action. The results were a profit to themselves and increased pleasure and happiness for many others. Are you ready to double your income? WClementStone toured the Asiatic and Pacific areas as one of 7 executives serving as representatives of the National Sales Executives International. On a Tuesday, Stone gave a talk on motivation to a group of businessmen at Melbourne, Australia. The following Thursday evening, he received a phone call. It was from Edwin H. East, manager of a firm that sold metal cabinets. Mr. East was excited. Something wonderful has happened. You'll be as enthusiastic as I am when I tell you about it. Tell me about it. What did happen? An amazing thing. You gave your talk on motivation Tuesday. In your talk you recommended 10 inspirational books. I bought Think and Grow Rich and started to read it that evening. I read for hours. The next morning I started reading it again and then I wrote on a piece of paper. My major definite aim is to double last year's sales this year. The amazing thing is, I did it in 48 hours. How did you do it? Mr. Stone asked East. How did you double your income? East responded, in your speech on motivation, you told how Al Allen, one of your Wisconsin salesmen, tried to sell cold canvas in a certain block. You said that Al was lucky because he worked all day and didn't make a sale. That evening, you said, Al Allen developed inspirational dissatisfaction. He determined that the following day he would again call on exactly the same prospects and sell more insurance policies that day than any of the other representatives in his group would sell all week. You told how Al Allen completely canvassed the same city block. He called on the same people and sold 66 new accident contracts. I remembered your statement, "It can't be done," some may think, but Al did it. I believed you. I was ready. I remembered the self-starter you gave us, "Do it now." I went to my card records and analyzed 10 dead accounts. I prepared what might previously have seemed to be an enormous program to present to each. I repeated the self-starter "Do it now" several times. And then I called on the 10 accounts with a positive mental attitude and made 8 large sales. It is amazing, truly amazing, what positive mental attitude will do for the salesmen who use its power. Now Edwin H. East was ready when he heard the talk on motivation. He listened to the message that was applicable to him. He was searching for something. And he found what he was looking for. Our purpose in relating this particular story is that you, too, have read about Al Allen. But you may not have seen how you could apply the principle to your own experience. Edwin H. East did. And you can, too. You can apply the principles in each of the stories you read in success through a positive mental attitude. Now, however, we want you to learn the self-starter, "Do it now." Sometimes a decision to act immediately can make your wildest dreams come true. It worked that way for Manly Swayze. You can mix business and pleasure. Manly loved hunting and fishing. His idea of the good life was to hike 50 miles into the woods with his pole and his rifle, and hike back a couple of days later exhausted, muddy, and very happy. The only trouble with this hobby was that it took too much time out from his work as an insurance salesman. Then one day, as he reluctantly left a favorite Bass Lake and headed back to his desk, Manly had a wild idea. Suppose, somewhere, there were people living in a wilderness, people who needed insurance. Then he could work and be out of doors at the same time. And indeed, Manly discovered, there was such a group of people, the men who worked for the Alaska Railroad. They lived in scattered section houses strung out along the 500-mile length of the track. What if he were to sell insurance to these railroad men, and to the trappers and gold miners along the route? The same day that the idea came to him, Swayze began making positive plans. He consulted a travel agent and began packing. He didn't pause to let doubts creep in and frighten him into believing that his idea might be scatterbrained, that it might fail. Instead of picking the idea apart for its flaws, he took a boat to Seward, Alaska. He walked the length of the railroad. Many, walking Swayze, as he was called, became a welcome sight to these isolated families, not only because sold insurance when no one else had thought them worth bothering with, but because he represented the outside world. He went the extra mile. For he taught himself how to cut hair, and did it free of charge. He taught himself how to cook, too. Since the single men ate mostly canned foods and bacon, Manly, with his culinary skills, was a welcome guest. And all the while he was doing what came naturally. He was doing what he wanted to do, tramping the hills, hunting, fishing and, as he puts it, living the life of Swayze. In the life insurance business there is a special place of honor reserved for men who sell over $1 million worth of business in 1 year. It is called the $1 Million Round Table. Now the remarkable and almost unbelievable part of Manly Swayze's story is that, having acted on his impulse, having taken off for the wilds of Alaska, having walked the railroad where no one else had bothered to go, he did his $1 million of business, and more, in a single year, to take his place at the round table. And none of it would have happened if he had hesitated to employ the secret of getting things done when his wild idea came to him. Memorize the self-starter. Do it now. Do it now. Can affect every phase of your life. It can help you do the things you should do, but don't feel like doing. It can keep you from procrastinating when an unpleasant duty faces you. But it can also help you, as it did Manly Swayze, to do those things that you want to do. It helps you seize those precious moments which, if lost, may never be retrieved. The endearing word to a friend, for example. The telephone call to an associate, just telling him that you admire him. All in response to the self-starter Do It Now. Write yourself a letter. Here is an idea to help you get started. Sit down and write yourself a letter, telling the things you always intended to do as though they had already been accomplished, some personal, some charitable, and others community projects. Write the letter as if a biographer were writing about the wonderful person you really are when you come under the influence of positive mental attitude. But don't stop there. Use the secret of getting things done. Respond to the self-starter Do It Now. Remember, regardless of what you have been or what you are, you can be what you want to be if you act with positive mental attitude. The self-starter Do It Now is an important self-motivator. It is the important step towards understanding and applying the principles of the next chapter entitled, How to Motivate Yourself. Pilot number 8, Thoughts to Steer By. 1.it is better for people to do something and pay nothing, than to pay dues and do nothing. 2. Too often what we read and profess becomes a part of our libraries and our vocabularies, instead of becoming a part of our lives. Stop and think about this. You have knowledge of principles that could help you achieve any worthwhile goal in life you might desire, but do you make these principles a part of your life? 3. Sow an action and you reap a habit, sow a habit and you reap a character, sow a character and you reap a destiny. What habits of thought or action, in any human activity, would you like to acquire? What habits would you like to eliminate? You should know how to acquire desirable habits and eliminate the undesirable if you have learned how to recognize principles revealed to you in this book and apply them. 4. The secret of getting things done is, do it now. 5. As long as you live, when the suggestion Do It Now flashes from your subconscious to your conscious mind to do that which you ought to do, immediately follow through with desirable action. It's a habit that will make you an outstanding achiever. 6. The burden of learning is upon the person who wants to learn. If you want to learn how you can achieve anything in life that doesn't violate the laws of God or the rights of your fellow men, now is the time to begin to study and learn the concepts that can teach you how to achieve your goals. Study and apply the principles contained in Success through a Positive Mental Attitude, don't only read what is written. 7. Now is the time to act. Do it now. Success through a Positive Mental Attitude, by Napoleon Hill and W.ClementStone, 1959. Chapter 9, How to Motivate Yourself. What is motivation? Motivation is that which induces action or determines choice. It is that which provides a motive. A motive is the inner urge only within the individual which incites him to action, such as an instinct, passion, emotion, habit, mood, impulse, desire or idea. It is the hope or other force which starts an action in an attempt to produce specific results. Motivating yourself and others. When you know principles that can motivate you, you will then know principles that can motivate others. Conversely, when you know principles that can motivate others, you will then know principles that can motivate you. How to motivate yourself is the purpose of this chapter. How to motivate others is the purpose of chapter 10. How to motivate yourself and others with a positive mental attitude is the purpose of Success through a Positive Mental Attitude. In essence, this is a book on motivation. Our purpose in illustrating specific experiences of the success and failures of others is to motivate you to desirable action. Now, therefore, to motivate yourself, try to understand principles that motivate others. To motivate others, try to understand principles that motivate you. Establish the habit of motivating yourself with positive mental attitude, at will. And then you can direct your thoughts, control your emotions and ordain your destiny. Motivate yourself and others with the magic ingredient. What is the magic ingredient? One man, in particular, found it. Here is his story. Some years ago, this man, a successful cosmetic manufacturer, retired at the age of 65. Each year thereafter his friends gave him a birthday party, and on each occasion they asked him to disclose his formula. Year after year he pleasantly refused, however, on his 75th birthday his friends, half jokingly and half seriously, once again asked if he would disclose the secret. "You have been so wonderful to me over the years that I now will tell you," he said. "You see, in addition to the formulas used by other cosmeticians, I added the magic ingredient." "What is the magic ingredient?" he was asked. "I never promised a woman that my cosmetics would make her beautiful, but I always gave her hope. Hope is the magic ingredient. Hope is a desire with the expectation of obtaining what is desired and belief that it is obtainable. A person consciously reacts to that which to him is desirable, believable, and attainable. And he also subconsciously reacts to the inner urge that induces action when environmental suggestion, self-suggestion, or autosuggestion caused the release of the powers of his subconscious mind. His response to suggestion may develop obedience that is direct, neutral, or in reverse action to a specific symbol. In other words, there may be various types and degrees of motivating factors. Every result has a given cause. Your every act is the result of a given cause, your motives. Hope, for example, motivated the cosmetic manufacturer to build a profitable business. Hope also motivated women to buy his cosmetics. Hope will motivate you, too. The 10 basic motives which inspire all human action. Every thought you think, every act in which you voluntarily engage, can be traced back to some definite motive or combination of motives. There are 10 basic motives which inspire all thoughts, all voluntary actions. No one ever does anything without having been motivated to do it. When it comes to learning how to motivate yourself for any given purpose, or how to motivate others, you should have a clear understanding of these 10 basic motives. Here they are. 1. The desire for self-preservation. 2. The emotion of love. 3. The emotion of fear. 4. The emotion of sex. 5. The desire for life after death. 6. The desire for freedom of body and mind. 7. The emotion of anger. 8. The emotion of hate. 9. The desire for recognition and self-expression. 10. The desire for material gain. As you have been reading this chapter, perhaps you felt that it contains food for thought. A good sandwich contains 9/10 bread and 1/10 meat. Unlike a sandwich, this chapter is 9/10 meat. That is the way the authors planned it. We hope you will chew and digest it carefully. Are negative emotions good? As you read success through a positive mental attitude, you clearly see that negative emotions, feelings, and thoughts are harmful to the individual. But are there times when these are good? Yes, negative emotions, feelings, thoughts and attitudes are good, at the proper time and under the right circumstances. For that which is good for the species of man is good for the individual. It is clear that in the process of evolution, negative thoughts, feelings, emotions, and attitudes protected the individual. In fact, these negatives prevented the species of man from becoming extinct. And these negatives in a person, like the negative forces of a bar magnet, effectively repelled the forces of the negative powers others. This has been. And because it is a universal law, it will continue to be. Now culture, refinement, and civilization, like man himself, have also evolved from a primitive state. And the more cultured, refined, and civilized a society or environment may be, the less need there is for the individual to use these negatives. But in a negative, antagonistic environment, a person with common sense will use these negative forces with positive mental attitude to oppose the evil with which he is faced. And because you live in a country with laws designed to bring the greatest good to the greatest number, because the rights of that individual are protected, because you are in a society and environment of culture, refinement, and the highest form of civilization, those negative thoughts, feelings, emotions, and passions which lie dormant within you from your hereditary past are not now necessary to solve the problems which primitive man could not otherwise have solved. For he was a law unto himself. And the law of the individual has become subservient to the law of society for his benefit. Now let's clarify these concepts. Let's take anger, hate, and fear as examples. Anger and hate. Righteous indignation against evil is a form of anger and hate. The desire to protect one's nation when attacked by an enemy, or the desire to protect the weak against the criminal attack of the madman to save human life is good. To kill to accomplish this, when necessary, is an example of the worst form of all negative feelings and emotions used to achieve a worthy purpose. In our society, the patriotism of a soldier or the fulfillment of duty by a police officer are virtues. Fear. With every new experience and in every new environment, nature protects you from potential danger by alerting you through some shade of the emotion of fear. You can be assured that the bravest individual will, in a new environment, at first, experience an awareness that is a conscious or subconscious feeling of timidity or fear. If he finds that the fears are not beneficial to him, the person with positive mental attitude will neutralize an undesirable negative emotion by substituting a positive one. What can you do about it? Man is the only member of the animal kingdom who, through the functioning of his conscious mind, can voluntarily control his emotions from within, rather than be forced to do so by external influences. And he alone can deliberately change habits of emotional response. The more civilized, cultured and refined you are, the more easily you can control your emotions and feelings if you choose to do so. Emotions are controlled through the combination of reason and action. When fears are unwarranted, or harmful, they can and should be neutralized. How? While your emotions are not always immediately subject to reason, nonetheless they are immediately subject to action. For you can use reason to determine the needlessness of the negative emotion and thus motivate yourself to action. You can substitute fear with a positive feeling. How do you do this? One effective means is through self-suggestion, in fact self-command, with a one-word symbol that incorporates what you want to be. Thus, if you are afraid and want to be courageous, give the self-command "be courageous" with rapidity several times. Follow this with action. If you want to be courageous, act courageously. How? Use the self-starter "do it now." And then get into action. In this and the next chapter you will see how to control your emotions and actions by using self-suggestions. In the meantime, keep your mind on the things you should and do want and off the things you shouldn't and don't want. A success formula that always succeeds when applied. Are you among the hundreds of thousands of persons throughout the world who have read the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, or among the tens of thousands who have read Frank Becker's book How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling? If not, we recommend that you read both. These books contain a formula that always succeeds when applied with positive mental attitude. In his autobiography, Franklin indicates that he endeavored to help Benjamin Franklin just as the most important living person wants to help you. He wrote, "Language modernized. My intention being to acquire the habit of all these virtues, I judged it would be well not to distract my attention by attempting the whole at once, but to fix it on them at a time, and when I should be master of that, then to proceed to another, and so on, until I should gone through the 13, and, as the previous acquisition of some might facilitate the acquisition of certain others, I arranged them with that view." The names of these virtues as Franklin fitted then, together with the precepts, self-motivators for self-suggestion, he gave each one, are 1. Temperance, eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. 2. Silence, speak not but what may benefit others or yourself, avoid trifling conversation. 3. Order, let all your things have their places, let each part of your business have its time. 4. Resolution, resolve to perform what you ought, perform without fail what you resolve. 5. Frugality, make no expense but to do good to others or yourself, that is, waste nothing. 6. Industry, lose no time, be always employed in something useful, cut off all unnecessary actions. 7. Sincerity, use no hurtful deceit, think innocently and justly, and, if you speak, speak accordingly. 8. Justice, wrong none by doing injuries, or omitting the benefits that are your duty. 9. Moderation, avoid extremes, forbear resenting injuries so much as you think they deserve. 10. Cleanliness, tolerate no uncleanliness in body, clothes, or habitation. 11. Tranquility, be not disturbed at trifles, or at accidents, common or unavoidable. 12. Chastity, rarely use venery but for health or offspring, never to dullness, weakness, or the injury of your own or another's peace or reputation. 13. Humility, imitate Jesus and Socrates. Franklin wrote further, conceiving then that, agreeably to the advice of Pythagoras in his golden verses, daily examination would be necessary, I contrived the following method for conducting that examination. I made a little book, in which I allotted a page for each of the virtues. I ruled each page with red ink, so as to have 7 columns, one for each day of the week, marking each column with a letter for the day. I crossed these columns with 13 red lines, making the beginning of each line with the first letter of one of me virtues, on which line, and in its proper column, I might mark, by a little black spot, every fault I found upon examination to have been committed respecting that virtue upon that day. Here is the chart. Temperance. Eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. Now it is as important to know how to use a formula as it is to know the formula. Here's how to use your knowledge. A formula in action. 1. Concentrate on one principle for an entire week, every day of the week. Respond by proper action every time an occasion arises. 2. And then, start the second week on the second principle of virtue. Let the first be taken over by your subconscious mind. Should an occasion arise when the employment of a previous principle flashes into your conscious mind, use the self-starter. Do it now. And then ACT. Continue to concentrate on one principle at a time each week and leave the others to be executed by the habits established in your subconscious as the occasion arises. 3. When the series is completed, stat over again. Thus at the end of a year, you will have completed the entire cycle 4 times. 4. When you have acquired a desired characteristic, substitute a new principle for a new virtue, attitude, or activity that you may wish to develop. Now you have just read the method Benjamin Franklin used to help Benjamin Franklin. As Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude is a self-help book, it would be wise for you to study Franklin's method and see how you can apply the principles. In the chapter entitled, How to Motivate Others, you will see how Frank Bettger raised himself from failure to success by employing Benjamin Franklin's plan. If you decide to start your own plan, and don't know exactly what principles to start with, you could begin with the 13 virtues used by Benjamin Franklin, or you may prefer the 17 success principles described in Chapter 2. Now for some bread for your sandwich. Let's tell about the first Fuller Brush man. Alfred C. Fuller, the first of the Fuller Brush men, came from a poor farm family living in Nova Scotia. Al couldn't seem to hold a job. In fact, during the first 2 years of trying to earn a living, he lost 3 jobs. But then a radical change came into Fuller's life. For he tried selling brushes. Right then Fuller was motivated. He began to realize that his first 3 jobs were not the kind of work suited to him. He didn't like them. The work didn't come to him naturally. But selling did. And he saw immediately that he would do well as a salesman. He liked his work. So Al conditioned his mind to do the best-selling job in the world. He was terrific. And having succeeded as a salesman, he set a goal in his climb up the ladder of success. It was, to go in business for himself. Now this goal fitted nicely with his personality, provided he was in sales. Alfred C. Fuller did quit selling brushes for someone else. And he had more fun than ever before. He manufactured his own brushes in the evening, then sold them the next day. And when his sales began to mount, he rented space in an old shed for $11 a month and hired an assistant who made the brushes for him while he concentrated on sales. The end result from the boy who lost his first 3 jobs. The Fuller Brush Company, with thousands of door-to-door salesmen and millions of dollars in annual income. You see, you are more apt to succeed if you do what comes naturally. But there are greater motivating factors than losing a job, making money, or success in business. The desire for self-preservation is the strongest on the list. 7 came through. Captain Edward V. Rickenbacker was one of the most successful and highly esteemed men in the United States. Captain Eddie, as he was affectionately called, is a symbol of faith, integrity, the joy of hard work and common sense. Those who met him, heard his lectures or read his book 7 Came Through are themselves inspired by the symbol he represents. The airplane carrying Captain Eddie and his crew fell into the Pacific. No trace of the wreckage or the men could be found the first week. Nor the second week. But the world was thrilled with the news that Captain Eddie was saved on the 21st day. Just picture Captain Eddie and his crew on 3 rafts in the Pacific with nothing in sight but the sea and the sky. Picture these men, if you will, suffering from the shock of hitting the water when their plane crash-landed, suffering from the heat of the burning sun, hungry, thirsty. Then picture the 3 rafts tied together each morning and evening, with each member of the crew bowing his head in prayer or listening intently as the 23rd Psalm or the verses from Matthew 6 verses 31 to 34 were read, "Therefore take no thought, saying, What shall we eat? Or, what shall we drink? Or, wherewithal shall we be clothed? For after all these things do the Gentiles seek, for your heavenly Father knoweth that ye have need of these things. But seek ye first the kingdom of God, and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof." Now, you have the picture, so let's hear directly from Captain Eddie himself as he wrote in his book. "As I have already stated, there was no time that I lost faith in our ultimate rescue, but the others did not seem to share this state of mind fully with me. My companions clearly began to think of what lay beyond death and to think of it in terms of their own lives. I say in all truth that at no time did I ever doubt we would be saved. I tried to impart my own philosophy to these men, hoping to stimulate their desire to carry on. It was based upon the simple observation that the longer I have had to suffer under trying circumstances, the more certain I was to appreciate my deliverance. This is part of the wisdom that comes to older men. Should you ask us how to motivate yourself, we would list the basic motives. They are repeated here. First, the desire for self-preservation, then the emotion of love, fear, sex. The desire for life after death, and freedom of body and mind would follow. And after that, the emotion of anger and hate. Then the desire for recognition and self-expression. And last in the list of the 10 basic motives would be the desire for material wealth. In the following chapter you will see how any one of these, or a combination, motivates others. Pilot number 9, Thoughts to steer by. 1. Motivation is that which induces action or determines choice. It is the hope or other force which starts an action in an attempt to produce specific results. 2. Motivate yourself with positive mental attitude. Remember, what the mind of man can conceive and believe the mind of man can achieve with positive mental attitude. Recognize the possibility of the improbable. 3. Hope is the magic ingredient in motivating yourself and others. 4. Negative emotions, feelings, thoughts, and attitudes are good at the proper time and under the right circumstances. 5. The 10 basic motives are self-preservation, love, fear, sex, desire for life after death, freedom of body and mind, anger, hate, desire for recognition and self-expression, and the desire for material wealth. 6. Motivate yourself as Benjamin Franklin motivated himself. Develop your own chart. Do it now. If you have difficulty listing 13 virtues you would like to acquire or goals you would like to reach, you can start with one and then add to your list as you realize what virtues or goals you desire. Like Benjamin Franklin, have a self-motivator for each. Important, inspect your progress daily. 7. Captain Eddie Rickenbacker had developed a strong faith that came to his rescue in time of need. How can you strengthen your faith to help you at the time of your greatest need? 8. Are you prepared so that you can and will apply your faith at the time of your greatest need? Hope is the magic ingredient in motivating yourself and others. Success through a positive mental attitude, by Napoleon Hill and W. Clement Stone, 1959. Chapter 10, How to Motivate Others. It is important to know how to motivate others in an effective manner and in a desirable direction. Throughout life you play dual parts in which you motivate others and they motivate you, parent and child, teacher and pupil, salesman and buyer, master and servant, you take each part. How a child motivated his father. A boy 2½ years of age was walking with his father after a very heavy Christmas Day dinner. When they had walked about 1.5 blocks, the youngster stopped, looked up at his father with a smile, and said, "Daddy." Then hesitated. His father responded, "Yes." The boy paused for a second or two and continued, "If you say please, I'll let you carry me." Now, who could resist this type of motivation? Even a newborn baby motivates his parents to action. And, of course, a parent motivates a child. We saw this illustrated by Thomas Edison and his mother. Having confidence in a youngster gives him confidence in himself. When the child feels that he is wrapped in a warm, secure belief that he will do well, he is actually able to do better than he knows. His defenses are relaxed, his guard down, he is able to stop spending emotional energy protecting himself from the possible hurts of failure, instead he spends his energy reaching for the probable rewards of success. He is relaxed. Confidence has had a measurable effect on his ability, it has brought out the best in him. "My mother was the making of me," said Edison. And Napoleon Hill himself had an experience in this direction. He speaks about it in this way. "When I was a youngster, I was considered to be a hellion. Whenever a cow was let loose from her pasture, or a dam broken, or a tree cut down mysteriously, it was young Napoleon Hill that everyone suspected. And, furthermore, there was some justification for all of this suspicion. My own mother was dead, and my father and brothers thought I was bad, so I really was pretty bad. If people considered me this way, I was not going to disappoint them. And then one day, my father announced that he was going to remarry. All of us were worried about what kind of a new mother we were going to have, but I in particular was bound and determined that no new mother coming into our home would be able to find a place in my heart. The day finally came when this strange woman entered our home. My father stood back and let her handle the situation in her own way. She went around the room and greeted each of us cheerfully, that is, until she came to me. I stood straight as a ramrod, with my hands folded over my chest, and glared at her without the least suggestion of welcome in my eyes. "And this is Napoleon," my father said. "The worst boy in the hills." And with that I'll never forget what my stepmother did. She put both hands on my shoulders and looked me straight in the eye with a twinkle in her own eyes that I shall hold dear forever. "The worst boy," she said. "Not at all. He's just the brightest boy in these hills, and all we have to do is bring that out in him." My stepmother was always the one who encouraged me to strike out on my own with such bold schemes as later proved the backbone of my career. I will never forget the great lesson she taught me in how to motivate others by giving them confidence in themselves. For my stepmother was the making of me. Her deep love and unshakable faith motivated me to try to become the kind of a boy she believed me to be. So you can motivate others by having faith in them. Faith, rightly understood, is active, not passive. Passive faith is no more a force than sight is in an eye that does not observe. Active faith steps out on its belief and risks failure because it assumes it will succeed. When you motivate others by having faith in them, then you must have an active faith. You must commit your belief. You must say, "I know that you are going to succeed in this job, so I have committed myself and others to your success. We are here, waiting for you." When you have that kind of faith in another man, he will succeed. Now faith can be expressed in a letter. In fact, a letter is an excellent tool for expressing one's thoughts and motivating another person. A letter can change a life for the better. Anyone who writes a letter affects the subconscious mind of the receiver through suggestion. And the power of this suggestion is, of course, dependent upon several factors. If you are a parent, for example, and your son or daughter is away at school, you can accomplish that which you might not otherwise achieve. You can grasp the opportunity, A, to mold the character of your child, B, to discuss matters that you might hesitate or never take the time to discuss in conversation, and C, to express your inner thoughts. Now a boy or girl may not readily accept advice when it is given verbally. For environment and emotions involved at the time of the conversation might prevent this. And yet the same boy or girl would treasure the same advice received in a carefully written, sincere letter. To a son or daughter away from home, a letter with all of its contents, including advice, is most welcome. And if it is properly written, it may be read frequently, studied, and digested. And the executive or sales manager who writes the right type of letter to his salesman can motivate them to break all previous records. Likewise, the salesman who writes his sales manager will benefit from this tool of motivation. Now, to write a letter, one must think. Therefore, the writer should crystallize his ideas on paper. And he can ask questions to direct the recipient's mind in the desired channels. In fact, he can ask a question to obtain a letter in return. Or when the person he would like to hear from does not write, he, like an advertising expert, can use a bait. That's what J. Pierpont Morgan did. One way to motivate a college student to write. J. Pierpont Morgan proved there is at least one way to get college students to answer a letter. His sister had complained that her 2 college sons just wouldn't write home. Mr. Morgan said that he could get the boys to respond immediately if he sent a letter. And then his sister challenged him to prove it. So he wrote each nephew and received an immediate reply from both. Surprised, his sister asked, "How did you do it?" Morgan handed the letters to her and she saw that both contained interesting information about college life and thoughts of home. But the postscript on each was similar. One read, "The $10 you said was enclosed in your letter wasn't received." Motivate by example. A successful sales manager knows that one of the most effective means to motivate a salesman is to set an example when working with him in the field. Clement Stone has inspired many people with the story he tells about how he trained a salesman who jived at Sioux City, Iowa. Here's the way he tells it. "I listened to one of our salesmen at Sioux City, Iowa, gripe for over 2 hours one evening. Now he kept on telling how he had worked for 2 days at Sioux Center without making a sale. He said, 'It's impossible to sell at Sioux Center because the people there are Holland Dutch, they're clannish and they won't buy from a stranger. Besides, the territory has had a crop failure for 5 years.' I suggested that we sell the next day at Sioux Center, the town where he had worked for 2 days without making a sale. So the next morning we drove to Sioux Center. For there I intended to prove that the salesman with positive mental attitude who believed in and used our company's system could sell regardless of the obstacles. And while the salesman was driving, I closed my eyes, relaxed, meditated, and conditioned my mind. I kept my mind on the reasons why I should and would sell these people rather than why I wouldn't or couldn't. Here's what I thought: he says that they are Holland Dutch and clannish, therefore they won't buy. That's good. What's so good about it? It's a well-known fact that if you sell one of a clan, particularly a leader, you can sell the entire clan. Now all I have to do is to make the first sale to the right person. I'll do it even if it takes a long time." Again, he claims that the territory has had a crop failure for 5 years. What could be more wonderful? The Holland Dutch are marvelous people and they save their money. Also they are responsible and want to protect their families and property. And, as a matter of fact, they probably have not purchased accident insurance from any other insurance salesman because other salesmen wouldn't even try. For they, like the salesman with whom I am driving, would have a negative mental attitude. Our policies offer excellent protection at a low cost. Actually, I'll find no competition. I then engaged in what I term mind conditioning. I repeated to myself with reverence, sincerity, expectation, and emotion, "Please God help me sell. Please God help me sell." Please God help me sell. Over and over again I repeated, please God help me sell. Then I took a nap. And when we arrived at SO Center, we called at the bank. Now the personnel consisted of a vice president, a cashier and a teller. Within 20 minutes the vice president had purchased the most protection our company was willing to sell, a full unit. And the cashier purchased a full unit. But the teller will never be forgotten by me because he didn't buy. And starting with the first place of business next to the bank, we began cold canvassing systematically, store after store, office after office. We interviewed every individual in each establishment. An amazing thing happened, every person we called on that day purchased the full unit. And there was no exception. While riding back to Sioux City I thanked the divine power for the assistance I had received. Now why did I succeed in selling in the same place where the other man had failed? Actually I experienced success for exactly the same reasons that he had experienced failure, except for the something more. He said it was impossible to sell them because they were Holland Dutch and clannish. That's negative mental attitude. Now I knew they would buy because they were Holland Dutch and clannish. That's positive mental attitude. Again, he said it was impossible to sell them because they had had a crop failure for 5 years. That's negative mental attitude. I knew they would buy because they had had a crop failure for 5 years. And that's positive mental attitude. Now the something more was the difference between positive mental attitude and negative mental attitude. For I had asked for divine guidance and help. What's more, I believed that I was receiving it. Now this salesman returned to Sioux Center and stayed for a long tune. And each day that he was there was a record day in sales for him. This illustrates the value of motivating another person by Ample, for this salesman also succeeded where he had failed because he learned the value of working with a positive mental attitude. There are many ways to motivate a person, but a most effective way is through an inspirational book. When you want to motivate, say it with an inspirational, self-help action book. The most important factors to success in selling are, in order of importance, A. Inspiration to action, B. Knowledge of a successful sales technique for the particular product or service, which is termed know-how, and C. Knowledge of the product or service itself, activity knowledge. Now, these same 3 principles can be related to success in any business or profession. In the story that you have just read you can assume that the salesman had knowledge of the sales know-how and knowledge of the service he was selling. But he did lack the most important ingredient, inspiration to action. Many years ago, Morris Pickus, a well-known sales executive and sales counselor, gave WClementStone a copy of Think and Grow Rich. Since then, he has used inspirational books such as those mentioned in Success through a positive mental attitude to help salesmen develop inspiration to action. Mr. Stone knows that inspiration and enthusiasm are the life of a sales organization. And because the flame of inspiration and enthusiasm will be extinguished unless the fuel that feeds it is kept replenished, Mr. Stone has made it a habit to see that his representatives receive inspirational, self-help action books frequently. And this is in addition to weekly and monthly publications that are intended to act as mental vitamins. If you know what motivates a person, you can motivate him. As a boy Walter Clark of Walter Clark Associates, Providence, Rhode Island, intended to be a doctor. But when he grew older, he thought he wanted to become an engineer. And he studied engineering. At Columbia University, however, he found the study of the functioning of the human mind so interesting and challenging that he changed from engineering to psychology. And finally he received his master's degree. Walter Clark worked as a personnel officer in Macy's department store and several other well-known concerns. At that tune the known psychological tests developed the specific information for which they were intended, an applicant's IQ, aptitude, and personality. But something important was missing. Walter endeavored to find the missing factor. He thought, an engineer can select the proper part and put it in its place so that a machine will function efficiently. And that is exactly what I want to do with people. I want to select the right person for the right job. You see, Walter, like many personnel officers, found people fail on their job even though their psychological tests indicated that they had sufficient intelligence, aptitude, and personality to succeed on the job. Why then do we have so much absenteeism, turnover, and failure, he asked himself. What's the missing factor? Now the answer to this question became so simple and obvious that it is truly amazing that other psychologists had not discovered it. For you see, a person is more than a mechanical body. He is a mind with a body. He succeeds or fails because he is, or is not, motivated. Therefore, Walter endeavored to develop an analysis technique that would a. Indicate the individual's tendencies in behavior in either a pleasant or antagonistic environment. B. Show the sort of environment that attracts and repels him under favorable or unfavorable situations. C. In essence, indicate what comes naturally to the individual. Also, he endeavored to develop a technique that could be used to analyze the requirements of a given job successfully. And because he worked hard and continued to search, Walter Clark found and recognized exactly what he was looking for. For he developed what he called activity vector analysis, better known as AVA. It is based on semantics, specifically, the reaction of the individual to word symbols. From the answers given by the applicant, Clark designed a chart. And he likewise came up with a formula for designing a similar diagram for any specific job. Now when the diagram of the applicant corresponded with that of the job, he had a perfect combination. Why? For then the applicant would have a job doing the kind of work that came naturally to him. And a person will do what he likes to do, it's fun. Now the sole purpose of activity vector analysis, AVA, as conceived by Walter Clark is to help business management in a. The selection of personnel (b) management development (c) cutting the high cost of absenteeism, d. personnel turnover. Walter Clark achieved a definite major aim. Now for many years WClementStone kept searching for a scientific working tool that could aid him in his efforts to help the representatives under his supervision to achieve success in solving their personal, family, social, and business problems. He was looking for a simple, accurate and usable formula that would eliminate guesswork and save time when applied to a specific individual in a given environment. Therefore when he heard of activity vector analysis, AVA, Mr. Stone investigated and immediately recognized that it was the working tool that he had so long been looking for. He could see that AVA might be used for purposes far beyond that for which it was conceived. And when he studied under Walter Clark, his conclusions were confirmed. For when you know, a. what the personality traits of the individual are, b. what his environment is, c. what motivates him, you then can motivate that individual. How to motivate another person. While reading Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude, you have seen the importance of semantics, word symbols, suggestion, self-suggestion, and autosuggestion. This was particularly true when you read Chapter 4. Now Mr. Stone combined this knowledge with what he learned from activity vector analysis, AVA. And thus he made what to him was a great discovery in the technique of motivating other persons. For the discovery was, with positive mental attitude you can be what you want to be, if you are willing to pay the price. This is true regardless of your past experiences, aptitude, IQ or environment. Remember, you have the power to choose. Now you don't have to study AVA to learn how to motivate yourself and others. But it could certainly help you. For you can use the proper technique when you know what motivates an individual. And the simple technique that you can use to help you motivate yourself and others is based on the use of suggestion, self-suggestion, and autosuggestion. Let's be specific. 1. If for example a salesman is timid and his job requires him to be aggressive, then a. The sales manager uses reason to point out that timidity and fear are natural. He proves that others have overcome timidity. He then recommends that the salesman state to himself frequently a word or self-motivator that would symbolize what the salesman wants to be. B. And in this instance, the salesman would repeat every morning and other times throughout the day the following words with rapidity and frequency: be aggressive. Be aggressive. He would particularly do so if he had a feeling of timidity in a specific environment where it was necessary to act. In such an instance he would act on the self-starter, do it now. 2. When a sales manager discovers that one of his men is deceitful or dishonest, he will have a talk with his representative. And if he sees the representative wants to cure the fault, then A. The sales manager tells how others have solved this difficulty. He gives the salesman an inspirational book, article, poem or recommends specific Bible passages. We have found that books like I Can by Ben Sweetland and I Dare You by William Danforth are particularly effective. B. And in such an instance, as in B. above, the salesman would repeat, be truthful. Be truthful, with rapidity every morning and at frequent intervals throughout the day. He would particularly do so at the time that he was tempted to be dishonest or engage in deception in a specific environment where it was necessary for him to make a decision. He would act on the self-motivator, have the courage to face the truth as well as the self-starter, do it now. Now this plan should be easy for you to understand as it is illustrated frequently throughout this book. And because you understand its effectiveness, you yourself will use it. And in addition, you, unlike the hundreds of thousands of persons who have read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, will now immediately use Franklin's method to achieve success. You, unlike them, have been given the secret of getting things done, do it now. Use Franklin's method to achieve results. Yes, many hundreds of thousands of persons have read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. Yet they didn't learn how to use the success principles contained in it. But at least one man did, Frank Bettger. He listened to the messages that were applicable to him. For he had a problem, he was a failure in business. And he was searching for a workable, down-to-earth formula that would help him help himself. And because he knew what he was looking for, he discovered Franklin's secret. Franklin indicated that he owed all of his success and happiness to just one idea, a formula for personal achievement. Now Bettger recognized that formula and used it. What happened? He raised himself from failure to success. He tells us about it in his great, motivating book, How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling. Now, why shouldn't you use Franklin's formula for personal achievement? You can, if you will. If the authors of this book succeed in motivating you to use this one idea, you too will, like Bettger, be able to raise yourself from failure to success. Or, if you are not a failure, then you will, through the use of Franklin's method, be able to obtain what you seek, be it wisdom, virtue, happiness, health, or wealth. Now Bettger wrote out his objectives on 13 separate cards. The first one is entitled Enthusiasm. The self-motivator is, to be enthusiastic, enthusiastic. As the great teacher and psychologist, William James, has so conclusively proved, the emotions are not immediately subject to reason, but they are always immediately subject to action. And the action can be physical or it can be mental. A thought can be just as stimulating and effective as a deed in changing an emotion from negative to positive. In such an instance the act, be it physical or mental, precedes the emotion. See how the plan works. Because the purpose of success through a positive mental attitude is to help you help yourself, and because the authors want you to get into action, we shall now illustrate how we motivate individuals in an audience to action through the Franklin-Bettger system. Here's how we have motivated many thousands of students to apply the Franklin-Bettger plan using the card Enthusiasm and the self-motivator, to be enthusiastic, act enthusiastic. We call a student to the front of the class and give him a simple yet effective lesson that he will learn immediately. Here's how we do it, try it. Here is the dialogue that would take place between the instructor and student. Do you want to feel enthusiastic? Yes. Then learn the self-motivator, to be enthusiastic, act enthusiastic. Now repeat this phrase. To be enthusiastic, act enthusiastic. Right. What is the key word in the affirmation? Act. That's right. Let's paraphrase the message and thus you will learn the principle and be able to relate and assimilate it into your own life. If you want to be sick, what do? Act sick. You're right. If you want to be melancholy, what do? Act melancholy. Right again. And if you want to be enthusiastic, what do? To be enthusiastic, act enthusiastic. We then proceed to point out that you can relate this self-motivator to any desirable virtue or personal aim. Thus we might take justice as an example, and a card could read, to be just, act just. And then the instructor would proceed. Remember, when someone else's idea is accepted by you, it becomes your idea for your use. You own it. Now I want you to talk in an enthusiastic tone of voice. I want you to act enthusiastically. To speak enthusiastically, do the following. 1. Talk loudly. This is particularly necessary if you are emotionally upset, if you are shaking inside when you stand before an audience, if you have butterflies in your stomach. 2. Talk rapidly. Your mind functions more quickly when you do. You can read 2 books with greater understanding in the time you now read one if you concentrate and read with rapidity. 3. Emphasize. Emphasize important words, words that are important to you or your listening audience, a word like you, for example. 4. Hesitate. When you talk rapidly, hesitate where there would be a period, comma, or other punctuation in the written word. Thus you employ the dramatic effect of silence. The mind of the person who is listening catches up with the thoughts you have expressed. Hesitation after a word which you wish to emphasize accentuates the emphasis. 5. Keep a smile in your voice. Thus in talking loudly and rapidly, you eliminate gruffness. You can put a smile in your voice by putting a smile on your face, a smile in your eyes. 6. Modulate. This is important if you are speaking for a long period. Remember, you can modulate both pitch and volume. You can speak loudly and intermittently change to a conversational tone and a lower pitch if you wish. 7. When the butterflies stop flying around in your stomach, you can then speak in an enthusiastic, conversational tone of voice. Do it now. Now in the previous chapter you have read the 13 principles used by Benjamin Franklin. And here you have been told that enthusiasm is the first of the 13 principles used by Frank Becker. And you know that a positive mental attitude is the first of the 17 success principles. Therefore, if you have not already done so, start the first of your own 17 cards with the heading, Develop a Positive Mental Attitude. Follow through with a card for each of the 17 success principles and use Franklin's method to achieve results. Your action on the self-starter Do It Now at this time would prove conclusively that you can motivate yourself. You can. And if you purposely motivate yourself, you will find it easy to motivate others. And now that you know how to motivate yourself, and others, you are ready to receive the key to the citadel of wealth. The next chapter answers the question, is there a shortcut to riches? Pilot number 10, Thoughts to Steer By. 1. Throughout life you play dual parts in which you motivate others and they motivate you. Learn and apply the art of motivation with positive mental attitude. 2. Motivate others to have confidence in themselves by showing them that you have faith in them and faith in yourself. 3. A letter can change a life for the better. Start the habit of motivating your loved ones by writing letters containing wholesome, good suggestions. 4. Motivate others by example. 5. When you want to motivate, say it with an inspirational, self-help action book. 6. If you know what motivates a person, you can motivate him if you learn the art of motivation with positive mental attitude. 7. Motivate others by suggestion. Motivate yourself by self-suggestion. 8. While your emotions are not always subject to reason, nonetheless they are subject to action. If there is an instance you recall in which you might experience the emotion of fear, what action do you think you could take to neutralize it? 9. To become enthusiastic, act enthusiastically. 10. To speak enthusiastically and overcome timidity and fear, A. Talk loudly, B. Talk rapidly, C. Emphasize important words, D. Hesitate where there is a period, comma or other punctuation in the written word, E. keep a smile in your voice so that it isn't gruff, and F. Use modulation. 11. Start the first of your 17 positive mental attitude success cards. Do it now. Anything in life worth working for, is worth praying for.